My daughter-in-law brought her lover to my husband's memorial and announced he was my husband's real flame. The words cut deep, but I steadied myself with the strength only years of sacrifice can give. Instead of shouting, I quietly began gathering every piece of paper, every log, every receipt that would speak louder than her lies. Little did they know that humiliating day was only the beginning of a storm they could not control. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment, letting me know where you're watching from St. David's Bell Tower, rose like a quiet sentinel over Congress Avenue, its limestone warm against a mild March sun. I arrived early with the program folded in my glove 5 minutes before the ushers laid out the rows. The stained glass threw small pools of blue and gold onto the aisle. I took a seat 2 rows off the center left side where I could watch without being watched. People nodded. I nodded back. My breath stayed even. It had been even since Robert died, and even when Kieran stopped returning. The front row was roped. On the end chair sat a card inside a brass stand, tidy serif letters declaring, "Widow Shannon Blythe." My name was nowhere. The placard did not shout. It simply rearranged reality. An usher swept past with a clipboard and a pen tucked behind the ear competence that made him look official. I said nothing. I memorized the typeface, the angle, the tiny nick on the brass stem where it met the base. Small facts hold under heat. A woman I did not know adjusted her black coat and angled her body so a photographer could see her profile. The usher returned, and with the brisk mercy reserved for strangers, he lifted a small box and removed the mourning veil. He turned toward Shannon. She dipped her head as if born to the gesture. The veil descended a soft black halo that was not mine. Father Merritt, reading the program near the lectern, glanced up. Our eyes met, and then he looked down as if the print had changed. I felt the sting. I stood long enough to feel my knees argue, then stepped back 1 pew and sat. The wood was familiar. Robert had varnished an identical bench in our backyard when Kieran was little. I slid a thin photograph from my wallet. Kieran at 6, with cake frosting lips, a freckle shaped like Texas near his right eye. I held it by the edge, breathed once, and put it away. Hope needs privacy. So does grief when it must serve as ballast. The double doors opened again. Shannon entered fully, then not just as a nameplate, but as a person draped in borrowed language. Beside her walked a man with a compact camera bag and a smile meant to be neutral. Aiden, I learned from a whispered hello behind me. He touched her elbow like someone who had practiced it. They took the front row center, and I watched the small choreography of ownership, her veil, his bag under the chair, their knees angling toward each other. Optics can be true long before word. The organist tested a phrase. The hymn numbers were set. People in the nave quieted the way wheat quiets when the wind drops. Father Merritt welcomed family and friends, his voice carrying the smooth wear of many Saturdays like this. I counted the heads of the tech crew at the AV table and noted the wall clock above the narthex, its minute hand fat and sure. Timekeeping is not a hobby in a crisis. It is a handrail. We sang. We listened. I tried not to hear the small edits made to the obituary in the printed program. A board service listed that Robert had left years ago, an accolade earned by a team and written as if solo. Little cuts. The bell in the tower coughed once, finding itself and settled. Somewhere behind me, a child dropped a toy that rattled and then became still. I let my eyes rest on the colored glass where a fisherman's net glowed gold. I have mended many nets. At 11:15, the bell rang true. Kyron rose, pulling on the jacket I had given him last Christmas, the one he had not thanked me for. He walked to the center of the aisle and lifted one hand the way men lift hands when they have rehearsed a speech. "This," he said, voice clear enough to reach the back pews, "is the real woman of my father's life." He gestured toward Shannon. The room made a sound like cloth being folded. Aiden's mouth tightened to hide a smile. I said nothing. I shaped the time silently with... Murmurs moved along the nave in low waves. Father Merritt shifted, then held still. I tracked who turned to look at me and who did not. Row 3 left Mrs. Cates from the neighborhood garden club, eyes wet. Back right near the font, 2 partners from the firm one whispering into his hand. The usher with the clipboard marked something on his page and avoided the front. None of this would be proof. All of it would be memory, and memory, if kept clean, holds up well when asked to testify. I smoothed my sleeve not to primp, but to quiet my hands. I drew my shoulders back and met the priest's gaze until he could not keep it. Authority is often gentle until it is not. I felt the old steadiness I had used on fevers and broken fences return to my spine. There are days you carry a household in both palms and smile so your child believes in weather. This was that in black. The hymn after the family remarks began low and serviceable. It did not deserve to fight for space with spectacle. I did not request the veil, did not step forward for the card, did not ask a single person to reconsider the line they had chosen to stand in. When the last verse reached the word, Amen, I rose. I counted my steps to the side aisle, a simple 8, and walked to the courtyard where live oak branches made a canopy, and the air smelled like cedar and warmed stone. The door clicked behind me. Counting breaths steadied my footing in air. I kept the time 11:15 and my silence. Both would matter soon. The courtyard air felt cooler than the nave, a shade drawn by the live oak. I set my palms on the stone planter and breathed until the hymn inside reached its last chord. No one followed. I straightened my jacket and chose to step back in on my terms. The nave lights hummed when I returned. Faces shifted, then stilled. Kyron stood in the center aisle with a cream envelope balanced between 2 fingers. He took 2 steps and stopped at the pew where I had paused. "This house is no longer yours," he said, voice level and public. He extended the envelope. I kept my eyes on his face, not the paper. I accepted it. The paper was heavy, the kind used for legal notices. From the wall clock, I noted 11:26. Within arm's reach stood Mrs. Cates on my left, the usher with the clipboard on my right, and a partner from Robert's firm down the aisle. With the usher's pen, I wrote received and my full name on the flap. I did not break the seal. Evidence before impulse. Shannon angled toward Aidan, finding his lens. Her veil brushed her shoulder. He lifted the camera just enough to make a record. She pressed a tissue to the corner of her eye for a beat too long. I watched her test the room for sympathy. I watched Aidan's stance wide for balance, ready to pivot. Father Merritt stepped down one riser and stopped. Peace, he said, perhaps to the room, perhaps to himself. Our eyes met. He offered a brief blessing that avoided friction. He did not address the seating or the card. I filed the disappointment beside the veil. At the back, the AV table held a laptop and labeled cables. The volunteer, her badge read, Bryn chewed gum. "Your video failed to render," she said. "We had to move on." On the screen, the firm's tribute carried a green check. My 3-minute clip wore a red X done by hand. Unfortunate or convenient? What test did you run and when I asked? Bryn straightened, then looked past me toward the front row where Shannon hovered. "We followed the order Father wanted." Shannon answered, smiling. There was very little time. I photographed the media queue. Bryn turned the screen a fraction away. The parish office sat off a side corridor, cool and carpeted. I asked the secretary to see the funeral register. She hesitated the way people do when they sense trouble approaching. It's customary for the family to review. Later she offered. "I am the family," I said. After a beat, she nodded, retrieved a leather-bound volume, and set it on the counter. The entry was printed in tidy type. Widow Shannon Blythe. I let the silence do the work first. "That is incorrect," I said. "Please change it to Maura Ellison." The secretary scanned my face, lifted the parish seal, and said, "We will amend it." She crossed the wrong name with a single line, wrote mine, pressed the blue stamp, and printed a copy dated today. I slid the stamped copy into my clutch behind the envelope. In the vestibule, I paused. I weighed the flap with my thumb. Opening it would feel like tearing into meat. Leaving it closed felt like building a bridge. I chose the bridge. Keep the chain of custody clean. I moved toward the side door that lets you leave without recrossing the center aisle. The wall clock read 11:58. I noted who watched me go the partner from the firm, a neighbor, Bryn eyes lowered, and Father Merritt, whose mouth shaped a word he did not speak. The organ began a soft postlude. I pushed the bar. On the courtyard path, the shadows had shortened. I kept my attention on the weight in my hand and the blue seal in my clutch. My car was 2 blocks away in a garage where tickets print the time to the minute. I would keep the ticket. I would keep the envelope sealed. I would keep the register copy flat until I could scan it. Some people build a case by shouting. I have learned to build one by keeping things clean. I reached the sidewalk and merged with Saturday traffic. In my pocket, the photo of Quran at 6 pressed a faint square against my leg. I thought about the house not as an address, but as a ledger of meals, broken hinges holidays, and late-night homework. I thought about Robert's study and the way his cologne still clung to the chair leather. The envelope was silent. The parish copy was not. It said my name. At the garage, I took the stairs, counting as I climbed. On level 3, the light fell in diagonals through the open side. My car chirped when I clicked the fob. I placed the envelope flat in the trunk between 2 canvas grocery bags and set my clutch on the passenger seat. I sat a moment with both hands on the wheel. The drive home took 8 minutes. At each red light, I checked the envelope with a glance, the way you check a sleeping child from the doorway. The city slid past muraled brick food trucks, a thrift store. On my street, the live oaks crossed branches like neighbors leaning to whisper. I pulled into the drive and turned off the engine. I unlocked the front door and stepped into a house that knew my footsteps. Afternoon light pooled on the hallway runner. The study door stood closed the way he always left it. I set my clutch on the console, took the envelope, and carried it in with both hands as if it could spill. I did not open it. Not yet. I breathed once. I looked at the chair where he sat and the stack of legal pads on the desk, one page dog-eared by a man who meant to return. The envelope would wait. The study at home would not. I unlocked the front door with the same small twist I had made 1,000 times. The house answered with quiet lilies browning by the stairs, a coat still on the hall tree that smelled faintly of cedar. Sunlight lay across the rug. I stood on the threshold to see if anything was out of place. Nothing screamed intrusion. I moved room by room. The neighbors' casseroles sat in a row. I washed my hands and walked toward Lyle's study. The door eased open on the scent that had followed him for years, bergamot and something warm underneath it, threaded through leather and paper dust. The blinds were half tilted, light pooled across the 2 tidy desks. Frames on the credenza watched me awards, diplomas, a photo of Chiron at 12. I set my purse on the chair, took out the parish register copy and slid it into the center drawer. One correction. I tested each drawer. Top right pencils, checkbook stubs, a dried-out highlighter. Bottom left files labeled in his blocky hand, tax HOA. Bottom right resisted as it always had. I held the key ring. The funeral home returned with his wallet and watch, chose the small brass key, and felt the soft bump as the lock gave way. The smell of his cologne moved as though it had been waiting. Inside the drawer, a flat leather notebook on top of a manila folder. The notebook was coffee brown. I knew his handwriting at once, not his client's signature, but the slant of late nights. I did not sit. I read the first lines. He wrote about mistakes like a man trying to dig with a spoon. He named Shannon. He wandered across years and the diagnosis. What began as covering a loss became altered statements and transfers. He wrote that Chiron needed a new story about his mother, and he had supplied it. I closed the book long enough to breathe. Then I opened it again and read like an archivist. I marked dates and accounts with tabs. I photographed pages, keeping glare off the ink. I needed my eyes to work. When the first pass was finished, I slid the notebook into a document pouch and set it beside the envelope. I pressed my thumb to the flap, felt the glue, and let it rest. Chain of custody steadied me. I packed a carry-on with decisions. Not panic, the parish copy, the notebook pouch, a charger, medication clothes, and a photo. I left jewelry in the tray and anything that could be read as flight. I would not make their work easier. On the kitchen stool, I sat and called Leora. Her voice was steady. "I have a guest room," she said before I asked. "And chamomile." "Do you want me to come get you? I'll drive," I said. "But I'll take the tea." "Come slow," she said. "The hill is blooming." We hung up and I dialed the number Vera had given me when her firm audited our HOA 3 years ago. Retired now, but she still knew how to follow money. I told her what I had and what I would not do without her guidance. "You already did the hardest part," she said. "You didn't read it like a wife. You read it like evidence. Don't open the envelope. Photograph the seal. Double bag the notebook. Tomorrow we'll make 2 off-site copies. 1 for police, 1 for your attorney. Keep a written log. Times, witnesses, locations." I wrote as she spoke the words, making a bridge. When we hung up, I dialed Jonas the attorney a former neighbor swore by. "Do you feel unsafe in the house?" he asked. "No, just unseen." "Good," he said. "Unseen helps. Don't open anything. Move nothing unnecessary. Bring the notebook and the parish copy. I'll call a detective I trust. And Maura, text your son 1 sentence. No arguments, no story. Just an invitation. When you have facts." It was 4:52. I took a slow lap to be sure I left the rooms as I found them. I turned off the study light, picked up my bag, and locked the door behind me. Westlake smelled like cut grass. Leora's porch light was already on, though the sky was still bright. She opened the door and held me. "Kitchen," she said, then bed. We sealed the notebook and parish copy and wrote the date and time. She poured tea. I drank half and felt heat ease my ribs. "Stay as long as you need," she said. "No explanations. We'll make lists in the morning." Vera suggested duplicates and a police contact, I said. Of course she did. Vera was born with a ledger where other people keep a diary. We smiled without humor, and it felt like strength. I texted the parish office to confirm the corrected widow entry had been logged and that a stamped copy was in my possession. Then I opened a note titled Evidence Log. I typed each step since the church courtyard, the times, and names. Memory is also a muscle you can train. Before I slept, I sent Chiron exactly what Jonas told me to send. I will talk when the facts can be trusted. No mothering, no pleading. I set the phone face down and listened to the dishwasher. I lay on the guest bed watching the ceiling fan. The house on Phlox Ridge would sit in the dark, holding its notebook and envelope. I had done what I could do today, and I had not raised my voice once. That was not weakness. It was aim. I slept. Rest. By morning, the study would belong to the police, not to our ghosts. Jonas met me past the metal detector where the air smelled like toner and old coffee. I signed the log, surrendered my phone, and clipped a badge to my jacket. "Answer only what's asked," he murmured. I flattened my hands to stop the tremor and followed him down a humming corridor. Detective Sloane Kenda waited in a glass-walled room. Sleeves rolled a file already open to the tab with my name. Ellison Maura Poi. She clicked the recorder on, stated the date and time, then held my eyes as if to weigh what would stand without props. "Mrs. Ellison, where were you on the dates of these transfers?" She slid a sheet across the table. Jonas angled it toward himself. I skimmed the list Thursday afternoons, months apart. Times I'd been at the library volunteer desk or driving Lyle to appointments. I kept to facts. On March 12th at the downtown branch, there's a sign-in sheet. On May 6th, with Father Merritt arranging memorial music. How were household finances handled? Lyle managed them, I said. I paid utilities from the joint account. He handled investments and anything to do with the firm. Access to his office systems. Number grief had stolen sleep, not memory. I set the cream envelope on the table, its seal catching the light. My son handed me this yesterday in the sanctuary. I marked the flap received with time and 2 witnesses. Kenda photographed it, logged it, and slid it back. "Keep it sealed," she said. "Chain of custody matters." Next, I laid out color printouts photos of the leather journal I'd shot without turning too many pages. Dates, initials, account nicknames, sums. Copies only, I said. The original is secured. Jonas nodded. Will arrange formal surrender after duplication. Kenda read in silence, then tapped a line about special accounts and make it look routine. The room cooled. She opened another folder and set down signature pages from an offshore account. My name flowed there, in a hand that looked like mine in a hurry. Is that your signature? It looks similar, I said, but it isn't. Jonas requested a handwriting expert. Kenda agreed, making a note. Relief moved through me like air. Questions wound through ordinary lanes, passports, vacations, introductions. I kept my answers narrow. When she stopped the recorder, Kenda's tone lightened. If anything else is in the home office, we need to know. If there is, I said you will. Outside morning had bleached into noon. I called Vera from the parking lot, reading her the questions while I buckled my seatbelt. Second sweep, she said. Walls, panels, shed, tap for hollows, photograph the process, inventory, everything. No late-night heroics. Daylight only, I promised. I stopped at Leora's for gloves and painter's tape. Text me when you're done, she said, handing me a thermos and a look that felt like ballast. Back at Phlox Ridge, the house was still and expectant. I announced myself to the empty rooms and walked straight to the backyard shed. The lock turned easily. A single bulb revealed dust like slow rain. Shelves held paint cans, tools a cracked terracotta pot from the year we thought tomatoes would teach patience. I wrapped the west wall solid, then not. A different timbre. I traced a seam with my fingertips and slid a putty knife beneath the plywood edge. The panel lifted with a reluctant sigh. Behind it, a waterproof container waited, taped twice over like anxiety turned into craft. I set it on the workbench, photographed every angle with the time visible, then used a box cutter to free the lid. Inside, a black USB and a zip bag bank deposit slips, and a letter folded in thirds with Lyle's hand on the outside for Maura, if you must. I didn't open the letter. I logged each item on an index card with numbers, descriptions, and location shed west wall panel A. The method steadied me in a way prayer had not. I sealed the USB in a new bag, the slips in another, then photographed the workbench again with items spaced and labeled. This, I thought, is how you testify when your voice is doubted. I called Kenda from the driveway speaker on engine off. I have a container, I said. Black USB deposit slips and a letter addressed to me unopened. Jonas joined by conference. We set a morning handoff at APD Evidence Unit present. Store them off-site tonight, Jonas said. No risks. Understood, I replied. Leora answered my text before the call ended. Gate is open. Dusk softened the street when I carried the pouch into Leora's kitchen. We placed everything into her fire safe, signed a short note describing what we'd stored, and photographed the note and the closed lock. Tea, she asked. Not yet, I said. Sleep first. She touched my shoulder. You're doing this with grace. In bed at her house, I drafted a list for morning copy. The index card print, time-stamped photos. Bring the envelope and journal photos, leave originals secured until receipt is signed. I set an alarm for 6 and placed my badge on the nightstand like a relic from a life I hadn't consented to. The house settled. Somewhere down the street, a dog argued with the dark and then forgave it. I breathed until the ceiling stopped moving. By sunrise, the container would change hands. By noon, the balance of power would too. I pictured the shed wall closing behind me, the secret no longer its burden, but mine to carry properly, one numbered bag at a time. I badged through the glass doors with Detective Kenda on my left and Jonas on my right. The lab corridor hummed with a steady hum. A cart rattled past with sealed evidence pouches and a clipboard tucked beneath a blue strap. I matched my breath to my steps and kept my hands folded so no one mistook nerves for guilt. Doctor. Rowan Keats waited in a room that was all windows and angles. Gloves on sleeves, rolled hair clipped back. Rowan greeted us with a nod, turned on the overhead projector, and asked me to confirm which exemplars were mine. I said yes without apology. The truth does not need a second try. Rowan started with method, not verdict. Pen lifts baseline drift, the hesitation that creeps in when a hand is tracing, not writing. They overlaid my signatures and the disputed one's lines, glowing pale against darker strokes. "Look here," Rowan said, pointing with a capped pen. "This loop recurs too perfectly. Real writing changes with speed and mood." In the corner of the glass, I saw my reflection, older, steady, unafraid of science. The room changed temperature when Rowan spoke the sentence that mattered. "On these 3 forms, the signatures are high-probability simulations. In professional terms, this is a forgery." Jonas didn't cheer. He only breathed. Detective Kenda marked the finding on an evidence log and asked Rowan to prepare a short memo. I let my shoulders fall half an inch and thanked no one out loud. Kenda's voice softened, not because I became a different woman, but because the facts shifted. "Mrs. Ellison, is there anything else at home records notes that could help us tighten the timeline?" I confirmed the journal existed and that I had photographed select pages with timestamps. "We can produce a certified copy today," Jonas added and set a chain of custody date for the original. Rowan nodded. We turned to calendar math, the kind that can exonerate or erase a person. Travel records, my pharmacy receipts, the memorial program transactions logged at hours when I was teaching a memoir class at the library. A pattern emerged. Whoever opened those accounts knew our filing cabinet and my habits when I walked the neighborhood, when I baked, when I napped on Sundays. It felt like someone standing behind me in my own kitchen, silent, taking notes. In the lobby, I took a paper cup of coffee that tasted like warm pennies and texted my son, "I can meet you at 2 Clarksville. 4 sentences." I didn't use emojis or apologies. Boundaries require clear edges. At 2 o'clock, I chose a window seat where the light could find his face. Kyron arrived in a jacket he thought made him look older. He hovered, then sat when I nodded to the chair. I slid a napkin between us the way you place a bookmark to keep a story from being torn. "I'm going to use 4 sentences," I said, keeping my voice low enough that only he could hear. "After that, we deal in facts." "I love you," I began. I did not sign those accounts. Today, a forensic expert proved the signatures were forged. If you want truth, walk with me, not ahead of me. I let the words sit like stones on a foundation I intended to keep. Kyron looked at the street at a cyclist coasting past the bakery at the waitress who pretended we were ordinary. He cleared his throat. "Dad kept files," he said. "Shannon explained a lot of this. You don't know everything." I did not argue the quality of her explanations or the emptiness of his faith. 4 sentences, I repeated. Then facts. I took a breath that didn't tremble and opened my clutch. I slid a single sheet across the table, the parish register page stamped and corrected, naming me as Lyle's widow. It was not evidence of embezzlement, only of truth, and sometimes that is the kind that shifts a son's posture. His eyes moved over the line twice as if the letters might change if he watched long enough. Outside, a bell from a nearby church counted the half hour. I stood first. "I'll meet you again after you've read what I give you," I said. "Jonas will send you copies of the lab memo and the page references we mapped with Detective Kenda. Read them, then call me." Kieran folded the register copy with a precision that broke my heart, pocketed it, and nodded without promise. Back on the sidewalk, the wind off 6th Street lifted the edge of my sleeve and cooled the part of me that had been burning all morning. Vindication is not a parade. It is a clean ledger and a door left unlocked for the right person. Tomorrow, Vera would put a name to the money trail. I tightened my grip on my bag and let the day end without begging it to be different. On the walk to my car, I called Vera and left a message. The finding was formal now, not just a hope I carried like a match in my pocket. She texted back a checklist emoji and then words, "Tonight, back up the photos to 2 places." I forwarded the parish copy to my own email, then to Jonas, labeling the subject line with the date and time. An older couple leaving the cafe smiled at me in that way strangers do when they sense a storm has finally broken somewhere they cannot see. I nodded and kept moving. At the curb, I paused long enough to write 4 more words in my small notebook, truth paper, patience witnessed the tools I could still trust at 65. I was not chasing vindication anymore. I was building it page by page in a handwriting that was only mine. I drove home in rain. Vera had coffee ready before the sun burned off the hill country haze. Her home office smelled like printer ink and cedar cleaner. On the wall, a corkboard held neat rows of receipts, the kind of order that steadies a frightened heart. She slid a stapled packet to me and tapped the first page with a pen. Shell companies, merchant accounts, transfers that looped like a lasso. One name appeared again and again, tucked into memos and routing notes, as if daring someone to notice Drew Sutter. We worked quietly. Vera highlighted 3 clusters of activity and circled dates. These spikes, she said, match claimed business trips. I opened my phone calendar. The same weeks lined up with florist calls, obituary drafts, and the meeting when Father Merritt asked about readings. The timing bruised, but it also clarified the story. While I arranged hymns, someone else arranged withdrawals. I steadied my breath and watched the lines converge. "Do not chase," Vera said, as if reading my pulse. "Document." She handed me an evidence checklist screenshots with system clocks, visible printed ledgers initialed, and dated a short affidavit in plain language. "We keep our tone cool and our paperwork hot." I nodded. It fit the line I had been walking since the memorial no yelling only standards. We agreed I would carry copies to APD this afternoon and asked Detective Kenda to include them in warrants. I slid the packet into a red folder and walked to the door. We agreed to keep duplicate sets in separate envelopes, each labeled, dated, and initialed. Vera would scan the originals and store them in her fireproof cabinet. At 10, I parked behind St. E. David's and let the nave's stone calm my chest. I had come for church, not comfort. The office assistant recognized me from the register correction and called for Bryn. The AV booth was smaller than I remembered, a plywood island, 2 monitors, and a small mixer. Bryn rubbed her palms on her jeans. "I felt sick Saturday," she said. "Your file tested fine that morning." She pulled up the queue, walked me through the timestamps. My chest cooled. "Please slow down," I said gently. "We'll write it exactly." Bryn swallowed and opened a blank incident form. She described the test, the final check, the moment Shannon leaned in and asked for a new order, and the way Aiden reached over her shoulder and dragged my father-son photos into a deleted bin. "No file failure," she wrote. "Intentional removal." She printed, signed, and dated the page. I did not hug her. I simply said, "Thank you for being specific." Out in the corridor, a shadow leaned and straightened. She stepped into the doorway, mouth shaped into concern. "I wish you'd told me you'd be here," she began. Bryn's eyes flitted to me. I kept mine on the paper in my hand. "The office has what it needs," I said. And to Bryn, "You did the right thing." Then I walked past Shannon, who swayed as if expecting a collision that never came. Outside, the live oak stitched lace on the pavement. I breathed until the air was mine again. At 2:30, I sat across from Detective Kenda in a small interview room built for patients. I slid Vera's packet, Bryn's report, and my time-stamped notes across the table. Kenda read in silence, underlining small checks beside each time. "Sutter's name is not new to us," she said at last. "This brings him into your orbit." Jonas, steady to my right, added, "and keeps my client in witness posture." Kenda nodded. "We'll draft the warrants." The room didn't change shape, but the air did. My phone buzzed as I reached the parking lot. Unknown number. A voicemail followed a man's voice, smooth with borrowed confidence. "Ms. Ellison Drew Sutter, I'm sorry for your loss. There have been misunderstandings. I'd be happy to clarify off the record." I saved the message and added a line to my log. 3:17 p.m. voicemail from Sutter, no return call. Then I sent a note to Kieran. "Today we stopped calling it a mistake. No attachments." He read it, then went quiet. Back at Leora's, the guest room smelled faintly of lavender and drier sheets. We set Vera's packet and Bryn's report in the fire safe, where the journal already rested. Leora poured water, no questions asked. The sun slid behind the ridge, turning the street gold. I stood at the window and thought about bank carpet and glass cold until asked to witness. Tomorrow we would ask. Jonas had blocked his morning. Vera would email an updated flow to tuck under my arm. I did not rehearse speeches. I ironed a black blouse and chose low heels. I set 2 granola bars and a notepad by my purse. In the margin, I wrote a sentence to carry, "Show them the date, not the rage." Before bed, I listened to the voicemail again and then to the soft house sounds, dishwasher hum a dog down the street, wind in the oaks. Grief moved where it wanted to. Resolve went where I sent it. When the lights were out, I pictured the bank's glass cubicles and the way a deed looks when it remembers its owner. I pictured Kyron holding the parish copy I had given him, a small square of truth that doesn't wilt under heat. I pictured a teller sliding papers across the counter with quiet dignity. I did not picture an apology from Shannon. I pictured procedures working. It was enough to make sleep feel like a door that would open when I turned the knob. Now. By morning, the bank would speak and it would not raise its voice. The glass doors held the morning like a breath. Jonas was already on the steps, tie-straight eyes steady. Facts only, he said, and I nodded. Inside the lobby clock read 9:12. At the window, the teller's badge read, Tasha Moreno. "Good morning," she said, kind but neutral. She asked for ID and any original deed paperwork. Jonas slid my driver's license and our certified packet beneath the glass, along with the marriage certificate I've kept flat since 1981. I kept my hands folded. The door behind us sighed. I did not turn, but I knew the cadence of my son's walk and the soft fragrance Shannon wears for cameras. They stopped a polite distance back, occupying air the way stage lights do. Jonas didn't look at them. They may observe, he told the teller evenly, but they are not on the account. I stayed facing forward. The hardest part of motherhood is learning when to keep your eyes on your own paper. Tasha keyed in numbers, the thin light of the monitor reflecting in her glasses. "I'm pulling your property profile, Mrs. Ellison." She spoke like a nurse reading vitals. The printer shivered. "Policy requires me to address the titled owner," only she added, almost apologetic, as if rules were a harsh friend. Rules, I thought, are the only friends that don't ask you to perform. A man in a navy suit joined her Martin Cho branch manager stitched in white. He examined the screen, then the packet, then me. "Ms. Moreno," he said, voice low print, "the ownership confirmation and beneficiary memo." He faced the glass. "Mrs. Ellison, First Lone Star Bank records show title remains in your name. There is no executed transfer to any other party." Paper slid out with a calm, domestic sound. He stamped it twice, date branch initials, then passed it under the glass. Behind me, fabric shifted Shannon. "There's a revised will," she said, smooth as a radio host. "A deed change is anticipated. Her diction always lands like a spoon on china." Martin didn't raise his voice. "Anticipated is not executed," he replied. "Bank action follows documents filed, not intentions described." Jonas tapped his legal pad, once a metronome of assent. "Please include copies of all current control notes in our print set," he said. Martin continued, professional and unbothered. "We've placed a fraud flag on the property profile. Any POA on file remains limited and dormant absent your presence, Mrs. Ellison. Safe deposit access requires you plus identification. There was an attempted inquiry last week by a non-owner. It was declined per policy." He looked at me, not through me. That is a mercy I did not expect to want. I could have opened the cream envelope then in front of glass and eyes and the clean smell of lobby polish. Instead, I laid my palm on my clutch and left the flap closed. "We'll retain it sealed for APD," Jonas said, and Tasha nodded, as if we had passed a test. Decent people sometimes fail. I signed receipt for the stamped confirmation, my hand steady, as if it were any other Tuesday. Outside, the sun felt less like a spotlight and more like weather. Jonas folded the printouts into his briefcase. Across the sidewalk, Kyron studied a traffic cone, as if it had wisdom. I wanted to press the pages into his hands and say, "Here, let the paper tell you what I no longer can." But boundaries are not barricades, they are lanes. "I'll share documents when you're ready to read, not argue," I said quietly. He gave the smallest nod a son can give and still be my son. After lunch, I drove to the Plox Ridge Gatehouse. Officer Greer leaned out the window scanner in hand. The red light blinked, then turned green. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ellison," he said like a neighbor speaking over a fence. The barrier lifted without drama, without an asterisk. Some salvations do not sing, they simply open. In the HOA office, Ms. Patel wore a cardigan the color of patience. She reissued my access card and updated the resident roster. "We've corrected the records," she said. "Denials last week were clerical, and we've flagged your profile to prevent repeats." She printed the gate log and handed it to me as if returning a photograph that had been misfiled under someone else's name. I thanked her not for favoritism, but for function. In my kitchen, late afternoon lay across the counter in a long rectangle. I set the bank confirmations beside the black USB pouch and the parish register copy. The cream envelope stayed sealed its weight the size of a swallow. I dialed Detective Kenda and left a message I will bring the USB and stamped documents at 9. "Jonas is available by phone. No drama in my voice, only a list. Grief taught me to inventory. Betrayal taught me to label." Before dusk, I texted Chiron Bank confirmed title. "I'll be home after 5. I can meet you tomorrow after the police appointment if you want facts. No attachments, no bait. Love does not chase, it invites. Dishes dried on the rack." Somewhere in the neighborhood, a mower stitched a steady line in grass. I looked around the room I had been told was no longer mine and felt its edges return to me, not as trophies, but as responsibilities. The water bill, the caulk along the sink, the light bulb over the stove that always burns a little warmer than the others. Paper had spoken where my voice could not. That was enough for today. I set the kettle on, steam rose. So, by dusk, the confession would change hands and the room would learn how to listen. I set the black USB and the waterproof pouch on Detective Kenda's desk. The chain of custody form already waited in a neat stack, my name printed, where suspicion had once tried to live. He read the label on the container, checked the timestamp on the evidence camera, and nodded. When the seal clicked shut around the pouch, the sound felt like a lid settling on a boiling pot. I breathed once and let the room hold the heat instead of me. I gave my statement without adjectives. I described the shed, the hollow wall, the panel that shifted with a flat knock. I listed every item I found, the drive, the bank, slips, the short letter. I placed my numbered inventory sheet on top handwriting squared times, recorded to the minute. Kenda asked only clarifying questions, and when I did not know, I did not guess. It is surprising how peaceful honesty can be when you treat it like accounting. In the lab, a tech mirrored the USB to a forensic workstation. I stayed behind the line hands folded, watching thumbnails populate the screen. My husband at his desk, a lamp at his shoulder, date stamps in the corner like small, unblinking witnesses. No one played any clip through speakers. The tech logged hashes and checksums and moved each file into evidence folders with names that would mean something in court. Restraint is its own kind of mercy. Kenda dictated notes for the record. Subject Lyle Ellison admits to embezzlement from client accounts, he said voice even as a ledger. He describes staging documents to imply spouse participation and refers to partners executing transfers. He names the spouse, Maura Ellison, as non-involved and not to be burdened with the specifics. He glanced at me, then not as apology, but as acknowledgement. I let the words stand like fence posts. I slid a certified copy of selected journal pages across the table. The original remained with counsel as scheduled. Kenda signed receipt and returned the copy to the folder marked with today's date and a barcode that would outlive all of us. The room felt less like accusation and more like paperwork, which is where guilt ought to live when it finally has to sit down. We aligned dates, confession timestamps, wire spikes, the week of the memorial. Lines drew themselves across a calendar, and the intersections pointed to hands outside our home operators who cared about timing more than decency. Kenda tapped one cluster. "Coordinated," he said. "That helps." He did not smile. I did not need him to. Jonas asked that every page I contributed be initialed in the lower right corner and that the lab photograph each page beside a ruler and color strip. The tech obliged, pausing to announce time and badge number before every click. We watched the ritual like churchgoers who know the hymn by heart. No flourish, only order the comfort of hearing each step spoken aloud and entered. Around noon, a new email found me through the contact address Jonas uses when my name needs a buffer. The sender signed as Elena Park. She wrote that she had been an internal compliance analyst at Lyle's firm, that she had flagged false returns, that her warnings were buried. She asked for a discreet meeting and the protection of a process that would not leave her stranded. I forwarded the note to Jonas with a single line: "If we can help her stand, let's." We met in a co-working lobby where plants softened the glass and everyone talked just below private. Elena's hands were steady. I noticed because mine were too. She set a plain thumb drive on the table and a slim folder of printouts. "I'm not here to make speeches," she said. "I'm here to give you what I kept." She asked for whistleblower instructions and a case number before anything else. Jonas nodded, already opening his notebook. The emails were simple and damning. Her notices to executives used words like variance exposure, corrective action. The replies said, "Hold off optics after quarter close." One chain CC'd Drew Sutter and referenced marketing optics for the Memorial Week. I felt anger rise and pass like a front. What remained was clarity. Paper had a way of choosing its own weather. We did not stage a scene. Jonas escorted Elena to APD. Kenda took her statement, copied her media under the same antiseptic light that had received mine, assigned a case number, and printed a receipt with the ink still wet. Elena folded the page into her bag as if it were a passport. "You weren't wrong," I told her, on the steps, the spring wind pushing a strand of hair across her face. "Thank you for writing it down." She exhaled in relief more than victory. Outside, the city moved at a Saturday pace. Families on the sidewalk, a food truck warming tortillas, a bus sighing at the light. I called Kieran. "2 independent records now place me outside of what Dad did," I said. "A confession video and a compliance trail. I will show you when you're ready to read." He was quiet, then he said, "Okay." It was not reconciliation. It was a door that did not slam. A second call came in from a number I did not recognize. I let it roll to voicemail and documented the time. If Drew wanted to clear up misunderstandings, he could do it with counsel present and a recorder running. I archived the message and wrote a short note in my logged "Do Not Chase" document. The discipline had begun to feel less like restraint and more like a kind of faith. By afternoon, the watch list had a face and an itinerary. Kenda called as the sun scraped the top of the parking garage. "We think he's moving," she said, voice clipped by wind. I was already in the car. 10 and 2 on the wheel, bag on the seat bank folder, buckled like a quiet child. Jonas texted as I merged onto 71, "Stay out of the frame. Witness only." I answered with a single word, acknowledged, and let the lane markers do the talking while my breath counted exits. At Austin Bergstrom, glass swallowed the afternoon. People rolled past in beach hats and suits, lives headed elsewhere. Gate 22 glowed on the board blue letters promising San Diego. I stood behind a pillar near the window, the kind that holds the ceiling without praise, and watched the desk. An announcement trailed across the air neutral as rain passenger Drew Sutter, please return to the gate. I looked at the clock. 3:41 p.m. I wrote it in my small notebook, a date beside a name. He arrived with a tan roller bag and impatience polished to a shine. He leaned over the counter, smile too wide for airport air, then flinched when the second announcement said his name again. I did not shift, did not speak. My phone stayed in my purse. The pillar was decent cover for a widow who had learned at last that silence can be a stronger witness than any speech. Gate announcements spoke his name. They did not say mine. TSA Supervisor Lark appeared first, a woman whose calm could have landed planes. 2 APD officers came with her badges, low steps measured. Drew tried to explain about an upgrade and a client dinner that could not happen without him. The officers listened the way good oak listens to wind present rooted. The cuffs clicked once efficient as a stapler. Someone's pretzel bag crinkled. My throat stayed level. I texted Kenda witnessed detention 4:07 p.m. She answered, "Thank you. Bank next." The sun angled lower when I stepped back into the parking lot. I did not look for him as they walked him away. He scanned faces hungry for a scene, for a flare of recognition to feed on. He did not get mine. My car started on the first try, a small Mercy, and the radio offered traffic and a church choir tangled together. I turned it off. Paper would be the only music today. First Lone Star's vault level breathed cool and metallic. Bank Officer Nguyen checked our IDs twice and led us past a corridor of doors that knew more family secrets than any therapist. Kyron walked beside me, eyes on the key he had found in Lyle's desk, brass on a thin ribbon older than the password age. We signed the access ledger. Nguyen set the box on the table with a practice lift, then stepped back to the edge of the room and waited, hands folded. We opened the lid together. Inside lay a small black USB marked Ledger Redemption, a neat stack of printouts describing offshore routes with arrows like tidy rivers, a notarized letter addressed to me in Lyle's hand, and a monthly statement for a clean savings fund I had never been told about. I did not touch the letter. We inventoried aloud, line by line, as if truth could be weighed with breath. We logged this. "We don't read it here," I told Clearin. He nodded once, jaw tight. Nguyen notarized the list and reboxed the contents under our eyes. APD's evidence desk waited like a patient clerk at the end of a long day. Officer Ellis sealed the USB and the printouts in separate pouches, labels crisp, barcodes bright. Jonas handed over the notarized inventory and Nguyen's confirmation. The scanner beeped one item after another, a sound that felt like doors clicking shut behind us in a dangerously long house. I stated for the record that the sealed personal letter would remain in my custody, unopened pending counsel's schedule. Ellis nodded and noted it on the receipt. The chain stayed clean. Her tablet chimed with an email while we talked. She read, then looked at me. The firm's board just issued an interim asset freeze. All accounts tied to Sutter and named associates. Your name is not on it. Jonas exhaled through his nose, the sound of tension stepping off a train. I did not celebrate. I nodded once, a small bow, to decent process, and wrote the time in my notebook. Another door clicked shut, this one finally on the right side of my house. I remembered the memorial veil and the clock that told 11:15. Paper, not rumor, had been lifting me back into my own name. Outside evenings softened the lines of the lot. I stood with Kyron beside the car and let the silence sit between us like a third person who had earned a seat. "You stood in the vault with me," I said. "Thank you." He looked down at his hands, then up at the strip of sky that the airport left us and said, "I'm starting to see it." I did not reach for him. Some bridges repair best under their own weight. He put his hand on the roof of the car as if testing a beam. I unlocked the door, but did not hurry him. Home met me with the good smell of coffee I hadn't made. Leora had left a fresh pot and a note that said simply, "Eat." I poured a cup and drank it standing steady as a plumb line. Then I set the bank's stamped confirmations in a folder beside the black USB pouch and placed both in the drawer with the quiet click that had become a kind of prayer. The cream envelope from the church still lay untouched in my desk, arrogant in its simplicity. 2 envelopes waited on my desk, one from a husband I buried, one from a bank that didn't lie. I turned out the light and let the room keep them. Jonas's conference suite was polished wood and quiet air. I set down a folder bank confirmation HOA log, and he laid the ground rules, facts only, no interruptions. I nodded. Shannon entered with Karen close behind. She started Dad promised, but I raised a hand. Please wait until evidence is presented. Kyron sat between us silent. Vera joined by video. You asked if there was proof, she said. Jonas confirmed chain of custody. Then the file played Shannon's voice. Drop her tribute. Drew wants clean optics. The timestamp matched Bryn's report. I stayed still, letting the room absorb what paper and tape could say. Kyron's voice cracked the silence. "Why did you need him there?" Shannon mumbled about image and appearances. I didn't add a word. When the clip ended, I slid 2 stamped pages toward my son deed confirmation, HOA reinstatement. "Paper speaks louder than pride," I said. He read slowly, shoulders easing. By afternoon, we met in the parish hall, a sunlit room with Deacon Holt keeping notes, not judgment. I turned to my son. "I love you. I was framed. The law knows it. If you want truth, walk beside me." He nodded once, no performance, just choice. A courier arrived with a sealed envelope. Jonas read aloud the firm's board, formally cleared me of wrongdoing, and apologized for reputational harm. Detective Kenda had vetted the language. No applause, just signatures that carried more weight than accusations. I looked at Shannon. "We will not discuss this again outside counsel. All future contact goes through Jonas." Deacon logged the boundary. Shannon signed pen clicking, sharp in the small room. Later at APD, Kenda briefed us Drew's arraignment scheduled more cooperation inside the firm, widening the case. My role, witness only. For once, being on the sidelines was safety, not exile. That night, I returned home. On my desk, 2 sealed envelopes, one cream handed at the memorial, the other from the safe deposit vault. I logged each source date chain and placed them under a paperweight. I texted Kyron, "When you're ready, I'll share documents. No arguments, only pages." He replied, "Tomorrow. Just me." I left the envelopes unopened. Some truths need timing, not urgency. The sky outside turned paper-thin gray. I brewed tea, then let it cool untouched. Tomorrow, I would open one envelope, not both. I set the 2 envelopes on my study desk just after dawn. One cream handed to me under the nave lights. One notarized pulled from the safe deposit box. I had promised myself and Kyron that I would choose law over sentiment. My fingers rested on the sealed cream flap, then moved to the other. The memorial letter stayed in the drawer. The bank's envelope opened neatly, pages inside dated months before Lyle's death. The text was formal but unambiguous, a redemption fund established from verifiable income streams, irrevocably assigned to me alone. No mingling with disputed assets. Instructions clear as ink, lawful, clean, and mine. For the first time in weeks, the knot at my chest loosened. I copied the letter, logged the time, and resealed the originals in a pouch. Habit had become discipline. I texted Jonas and Vera, proceeding to bank for fiduciary confirmation. At First Lone Star Bank officer Lyle Renshaw guided me to a quiet desk. He wore the face of someone who had done this often, but still carried the weight of trust. He verified the letter-checked account histories and tapped a memo from the printer. "Mrs. Ellison, these funds are clean. They cannot be touched by claims tied to Sutter or any associate." His words were clipped neutral, but the authority of the institution was a benediction. I signed further instructions: no transfers to anyone under investigation, no discretionary gifts. Any charitable use would go through a monitored trust. Guardrails, not temptations. I didn't need generosity to prove myself. I needed discipline to honor what remained of my name. By afternoon, the courthouse corridor pressed in like stale air. Reporters hovered, but my name wasn't the one they shouted. Drew shuffled past in cuffs, muttering at a lawyer's elbow. Shannon lingered by the double doors, eyes rimmed red, waiting for glances. I gave her none. I wrote down the docket number, the time, the names of officers. "Do not chase" document. Ms. Duarte, the clerk, pinned the arraignment schedule to a bulletin board. I photographed the page Drew Sutter arraignment set, my name nowhere in ink. I texted the image to Kyron with no commentary. Paper spoke better than I could. When his call came, his voice carried the weight of days lost. "Did you open the letter?" "The one that faced the law," I answered. I told him about the redemption fund, about its restrictions, about the fact it was clean. "Meet me at the parish garden at dusk." The garden was quiet, late sun washing the stone benches. We sat near the plaque that once mislabeled me, now corrected to bear my name. We didn't have to mention it. We both looked. I repeated the 4 sentences that had become my spine. "I love you." I was framed. The law agrees. If you want truth, walk beside me. He said, almost whispering, I'm trying. Try with your feet, I replied. He nodded, the smallest tilt, but it was motion. I told him of my decision from the Redemption Fund. A portion would seed a monitored trust for victims of financial abuse, beginning with our parish's support group. Not revenge, not payback, restoration. Kyron said nothing, but I saw the thought settle in him. At home, dusk deepened into gray. I filed the fiduciary memo with my other confirmations. Then I drew out the still-sealed cream envelope, set it under the lamp. It weighted heavy in its silence. Tomorrow I would read it. Tomorrow I would let the last lie face daylight. I broke the cream seal at 7:31 a.m., the house holding that soft Clarksville hush you only get on a weekday morning. Inside, a revised will with no witnesses and a clipped stack of receipts that had already been contradicted by bank stamps and policy. Paper not proof. I held each sheet to the window. Along the margins, registration marks bled through like stage tape. The notarization box was empty. Even the staple holes didn't line up. It wasn't a will. It was wardrobe. I didn't argue with it. I logged it. Date, time, location, page, count, condition. I slipped everything into a fresh manila envelope, labeled it in the tidy print. I learned cataloging spines, artifacts from memorial envelope. Then I texted Jonas and Detective Kenda, delivering artifacts for intake. Request receipt. I turned off the desk lamp, chose the calm coat, and left the house the way you leave a library. Quiet everything in its place. At the APD evidence window, the clerk scanned my license and slid a form. Kenda appeared, pen uncapped, the kind of ready that steadies other people. We matched my inventory to what lay on the counter page numbers, missing witness lines, the blank notarization box. Anything to add, she asked. Let the paper speak, I said. The clerk stamped the form, red seal, clean edge. I kept the receipt in my wallet beside a photo of Kyron at 6 cheeks glossy with birthday frosting. One truth beside another. Back home, I brewed tea and sat with the quiet. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt honest. I wrote 3 lines on a card and stuck it under the refrigerator magnet that holds grocery lists and funeral programs. No revenge. Restore what can be restored. Walk, don't perform. Then I folded laundry, watered the philodendron, and let the ordinary be enough until evening. By 5, St. David's garden smelled of rosemary and hose water. Deacon Holt set folding chairs as Vera and Jonas sorted folders on a small table. A simple placard waited by the walkway Redemption Trust for those rebuilding after financial abuse. No spotlight, no microphone hunt, just a ledger pointed toward people who needed a first clean line. We signed the founding documents without ceremony. The initial grant came from the Redemption Fund. The bank certified yesterday routed through a monitored trust with disbursement checks that would make any auditor nod. Counseling, legal consults, small emergency payments, the kind that keep a light on long enough to plan the next step. Kenda didn't speak. She didn't need to. Paper and process had already said enough. When I rose to the small podium, my hands didn't shake. I love my family. I was framed. The law listened. This fund listens next. The claps were gentle, the kind that bless more than cheer. No one asked for a speech. The garden didn't need one. Karen sat beside me on the bench near the plaque that once misnamed me. It now carries my name clean and correct. We looked at it the way you look at a headstone when grief has turned to memory. I'll volunteer intake on Saturdays, he said, eyes on the rosemary. Walk beside me, then I answered. He nodded the small kind of nod that holds. Vera found us with a brief update. Drew was remanded pending trial. Shannon faced obstruction review through her professional board. No press. No parade. Paper and process, I said. Paper and process, Vera echoed, shoulders easing like someone putting down a weight she'd carried too far. Parishioners signed a volunteer sheet. Someone brought brownies. Deacon Holt unveiled a brass plate at the edge of the walkway in honor of those who rebuild after harm. Names optional. People touch the metal like you touch water, not for luck, but to be counted. Twilight deepened as I turned on my porch lamp. The house glowed its old, patient yellow. I filed the APD receipt above the bank confirmation bookends to a long chapter. Then I rinsed a mug and set 2 cups on the counter, leaving one upside down to dry. A habit I never broke a room I never fully closed. You don't need an audience to keep space. On the back steps, the cedar air felt ordinary again. A neighbor laughed somewhere behind a fence. A screen door closed with that faithful little click that says supper is ready, day's work done. I thought of Lyle without fury. He chose performance at the end. I chose a line. I set the cup down and said it out loud, not to the garden, not to a ghost, just to myself. No more performances. The words didn't echo. They settled. Tomorrow the trust would open its ledger. The parish office would unlock and our first appointment would sit across from me with a folder whose corners had gone soft from being carried too long. I would ask for a timeline before a story. I would show where signatures belong when they tell the truth. I would make 2 copies and hand the original back with a clip and a calm, "You'll need this." And if they cried, we would let that be paperwork, 2 received, witnessed, not judged. Night gathered in its quiet way. I checked the back gate, turned the deadbolt, and stood a moment in the study. No more envelopes waited. Only the lamp, the receipt, and a small photograph of a boy with frosting on his chin, a boy who had shown up with his feet when words were too slippery to trust. I smiled small real and turned out the light. I'm not fearless, I'm practiced. This story taught me that quiet choices, clear records, and boundaries can outlast noise. If someone tries to rewrite your life, let paper process and patient courage speak for you. Help where you can forgive when you're ready, and never trade dignity for drama. What would you have done differently in my shoes? Have you ever had to choose proof over pride? Tell me below, drop a 1 if this reached you, or share where you're watching from. If it missed the mark, say why. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking through the next ones together.